Hello, my name's Ness. Welcome back to my channel. I like to talk about books. I know this is not my usual setup at all. You're probably like, where's all your books gone? But we're now with the season where when I finish work, it's pitch black and I can't possibly film in the room that I usually film in because it is just so dark. I need to sort out better ring lighting, better lighting in the room to possibly film in there. So I've migrated to my living room, but at least the lighting situation is a bit better. I'm too much of a perfectionist for YouTube. She says with hair that is an absolute mess. So today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in October. I do have 9 to talk about. I read 4 5-star books in October, which for me was just amazing. I'm very picky when it comes to giving out 5 stars. There was 8 books that I completed. 2 of them were actually sent me by publishers, which never happens for me. It might seem like everybody on like the book social media world gets free books all the time, but no, I've had like 3 in my lifetime. For me, they're really rare and I was happy to have them because they're books that I wanted to read anyway. And then I also had 1 book which I didn't finish. I had to stop, and I'll be talking about that one as well. So the first book that I'm going to start with is the middle grade that I read in October, and that is A Pinch of Magic. And I've tried to read this a few times over the past year, but always ended up putting it down because for some reason I just wasn't feeling it in that moment. And I'm so pleased that I put it down and waited until I was actually in the mood for it, because this is my first 5-star of the month. A Pinch of Magic is a fantastic novel. I first heard about this from How to Train Your Dragon and it sounded like the most magical book, and I just had to have it. And I completely agree that this is a beautiful book. In this book, 3 sisters are living with their grandmother and they come to find out that their family has been cursed. They can't possibly leave where they are living, even though they have such an adventurous spirit and want to find out more about the world that they live in. As sisters, they're very close because they have gone through shared trauma. Their mother is not there anymore and their dad is in a prison. And they come to find out that there's 3 magical objects which are going to be passed down to them when they get of age. And these objects have 3 different magical abilities. And they end up using these magical objects, much to their grandma's horror, and set about having an adventure themselves and get caught up into all sorts of danger. What I love most about this was the sisters' relationships, because I'm an only child and I really like to read about sisters' love for each other because I've always wanted a sister so bad. So I kind of like live that through books. I definitely get the sense of like that love that having a sibling can bring from books in a way that I can't experience in real life. I absolutely savoured this book. It had such a beautiful world. It had such amazing characters. Sometimes I really struggle to actually like absorb myself into a book, but with this one I had no problem at all. This was absolutely fantastic. I will be keeping this for a reread and getting book 2 in the series. I'm really excited to see where these characters go. So the second book this month was a 4-star, and this is one of the arcs that I got off a publisher, and that is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson, who is also the author of Monday's Not Coming. White Smoke is a young adult psychological thriller with a little bit of horror in. There was a few scenes in this book that honestly gave me the heebie-jeebies. Definitely think this is perfect for this season as well. I think this has come out at a perfect time. It says this came out on the 21st of September, but I believe the publish in the UK was delayed a little bit because of a paper shortage, I think. But it is out now and I really recommend this. I thought that this was a great addition to young adult horror. It draws on that sort of like American haunted house theme, which I absolutely love, and I thought it had some really like unique takes. It had a lot of unique things to add to the young adult world as well. It does touch upon drug use, so if that is something that you are sensitive to, I would maybe consider looking at more in depth about how drug use is portrayed in this, to see whether that would affect you in any way. I thought this was like a really positive attitude towards drugs. I certainly wasn't expecting this when I requested this of a publisher. I didn't know that that was an aspect, and it is only a small aspect of it, but I felt like it was a really good take. Like, it's something that we all know exists among, you know, like teenagers, and I love it when a book addresses things that other people aren't brave enough to address. But the main storyline is that a family move into a house which is like being given to them rent-free in return of them doing work for the community and sort of like upscaling the community. It also touches on gentrification, race issues, issues where a family is a blended family. For a standalone, I thought this was really brilliant. If they bring out like a special edition in the UK, I will be buying it. I liked it that much. So I absolutely would recommend this to anyone. Tiffany D. Jackson is a fantastic author and I really loved it. I flew through it. The only reason why I rated it down was because I thought the ending was quite anticlimactic. The ending just seemed to like stop. There could have been much more to it. So that was why I marked it down, because it just gave me a disappointing ending. But the rest of the book, I totally loved it and carried it for me. The next book, which was another 5-star read for me, was a gift for, I was going to say it was for my birthday, but actually there was no reason for this and it was just the nicest thing. This was off Lily and this is Every Heart a Doorway, which is my second 5-star read. I read this in 2 days. I absolutely flew through it. This was the book that I didn't realise that I needed. I know this book had a lot of hype a few months ago and a lot of people were reading it and it caught my eye and I just had it like in the back of my mind and I added it to my wish list. But then my best friend Rebecca read it and she didn't understand the hype and she wasn't that keen on it. She seemed to be, for her, quite forgetful, so that's why I kind of put it out the back of my mind. So when this turned up at my door, I was very surprised but also very excited as well, because I don't usually read novellas. I usually read really long books and I didn't know what to expect from something this short, because I've only read I think one book in the past 5 years which was under 200 pages and that was also a 5-star read. This was the book that I didn't know that I needed. This is the book that in my head I wanted but I didn't know how to portray what I wanted. It blends real life and the dullness of real life with fairy tales and magic and longing for somewhere else and wishing there was more to life and dealing with trauma along the way. I don't know how to describe it and I don't know how to describe how I feel about this book, just in the same sense I don't know what to say about the plot of this book if you don't know about it. So essentially what the plot of this book is about is that there is like a boarding school for children who believe that they have been to another land, kind of like Narnia or down the rabbit hole. So parents whose children claim that they've been to a fantasy world, who can't cope with their children anymore, take them to this boarding school which they think will correct them or correct their behaviours. Actually, this boarding school is run by a woman who's had that experience for herself and she's spent all this time trying to get back to the land that she truly believes is her home. The main character of this book is called Nancy, and Nancy has been to this really dark underworld type place where, you know, it's very like about death and she spends a lot of time being stood still like a statue. She has like a master who she looks up to and she ends up back in the normal world. Her parents send her to this school and she starts discovering other people like her and she starts finding out more about how these lands exist on some sort of understandable plane. And it's actually really believable. Like, I actually believe that's how it would work if there was like other fantasy worlds. At no point did I think this was beyond the realms of possibility, just because of the way the author had constructed the plot of this novel. I loved the tone of it. I don't know why, it was just so real to me and I really felt some of the emotions that some of the other characters had. And as if that's like a lot for such a short book, there is also a murder mystery. The murder mystery part was very exciting to the plot, but I felt like the execution at the end was a bit of a letdown, but still in no way changed how I felt about this book. This book is more than deserving of its 5 stars that I gave it, in my opinion. I think this was such a unique book. It was beautifully written. It was so clever. I can't wait to read more in the series. This is just something that I needed that I didn't know that I did. Which leads me on to my next book, which is my third 5-star read, which is Dowry of Blood, which is also a small novel, but this one does come in at over 200 pages. Where do I start with this book? This was another birthday gift of my gorgeous friend Caitlin, and I'd had my eye on this for a long time. I can't remember where I ever heard about this book, but I think I found it on a video where I was looking for like poly recommendations and this was on it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it in a lot of different ways. This book doesn't really have chapters And when I first was looking at the way that it was written, I was like, I'm not sure if this is for me. But this was one of the most beautifully heartbreaking, disturbing, soul-crushing books that I've ever read. This book is written like a letter from the first bride of Dracula to Dracula, and it follows her story from her being turned into a vampire through to him bringing on his other two partners, and her relationship with them, and her relationship with him, and the hundreds of years that they spend together. The heart of this book, yes, it's a Dracula's wives reimagining, but the heart of this book, it is a letter from the victim of a domestic violence abuser to their abuser. It is so heavy, and the writing is beautiful, and it is beautiful, and at the same time you are like, this hurts. There is so much about domestic violence and the tactics that abusers use in this novel, and you can just tell the raw love and power and hurt and soul-crushing agony that the main character goes through, and the transformations that she has within herself up until the final act of this novel. This is absolutely stunning. This is published by a really small publishing house in the UK called Nick's Publishing, and it blows my mind that this hasn't been everywhere, spoken about everywhere, like at the front of Waterstones. This was so good. Absolutely one of the best books that I've ever read. I mean, between this and this, I read these back to back and I genuinely thought I would never read anything again. Which brings me on to my next read. Obviously, I'd read these two books. They were beautifully written. I'd never read anything like them before. This was a totally new reading world and experience for me. I'm keeping these books forever, honestly, because I just want other people to read them. I will gladly lend these out because I just want people to read them and experience the absolute amazingness that was these books. So I knew anything that I read after this could never ever be topped. There was nothing that I had on my shelves that I was confident that could give me the same feelings that these two books had given me. So I then discovered that if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can read books on Amazon for free, like certain titles, without needing Kindle Unlimited. So I had a look to see what was on there, and a lot of the popular TikTok books were on Amazon Prime to read for free. That's what I decided I would do. Obviously, I don't have an electronic reading device, so I decided to download the Kindle app on my phone, which was not great for my eyes. But I did start reading a book, and I told myself, you know, I can actually deal with reading on my phone if it's the right book. So I wanted a free book as like a palette cleanser from the amazing reads that I did have, so that I could go into something that I do own with confidence. And I found Zodiac Academy on the Prime reading. I don't think it's there anymore, and I'd heard a lot of good things about this on TikTok. You know, it keeps coming up as like a spicy recommendation, as they say on TikTok, and it had good ratings on Goodreads. It's currently at over a 4-star rating on Goodreads. So, you know, I thought just something quick just to get me like back in like the mood for reading again after some amazing books would be really great. I did give this a good shot. I DNF'd this at 45%, and unfortunately I did rate this 1 out of 5 stars. And I feel like a lot of people are going to hate me for that, because when I don't like a book, people generally get very upset that I don't like it. But I did not like this book at all. This book made me so uncomfortable. It triggered my anxiety. I had an anxiety attack. Yeah, I don't mind bully romances. I've read some books that are bully romances and been fine with it. This was not bullying. This was straight up non-consensual acts. This was sexual assault. This was sexual harassment. This was uncomfortable that it had not been addressed at 45% in the way in the book. And I don't understand how you expect me to want characters to get together after they are borderline sexually assaulting each other. That is my opinion. I could not continue with this book. If you like the book, I'm very, very happy for you, and I'm very sorry to the authors. Not that they'll be watching little old me on a tiny corner of the internet, but I don't know if it is my personal experience that I have lived with, but this book made me very uncomfortable and I couldn't read it. Even though I really tried, because I think that the author deserves me making the effort, but this was awful. I will give you a little background if you're interested in this book. This is kind of described as like a Harry Potter for adults, and it's about two sisters who find out that they have elemental abilities and they are sorted, find out that they possess rare elemental abilities, and they go to school to develop these elemental abilities, and there is like a gang of 4 boys who torment them and make their life hell, which also includes a teacher who is absolutely not like any teacher that I've ever met, thank God. But anyway, yeah, it was a lot. So that was definitely a palate cleanser. And the next book which I read was my 4th 5-star read, although this one probably comes at the bottom of the 5-star piles for this month, and that is House of Hollow. I no longer have this because I gave this to Rebecca for her to read, and I got this for my birthday from Sarah from Ginger Books. This was also a relatively short read, although it did take me a couple of days to finish. I think if I'd read this before Every Heart a Doorway, I would have been more blown away, because it has that also like contemporary fairy tale mystery vibe to it. They're very much like the same genre, they have the same feel, but this one came across a little bit more horror. And again, like another book that I've read this month, it was about 3 sisters. This was so unique, such a unique take on anything that I'd ever read which was inspired by fairy tales, or you know, when I think of fairy tales I generally think of like happy meadows and nice flowers and like Shrek. But for me, this was like, whoa, a totally different reading experience. This made me very uncomfortable, this book, but in a good way. So the main plot of this book, without giving too much away, is that there is 3 sisters, and the sisters are very different. When they were very young, the 3 sisters went missing in their hometown of Edinburgh. They now live in London. But they went missing as children, and when they came back they were very different. But anyway, they grew up, they were very troubled, and the main character is the youngest of the 3 sisters who can't remember what happened when they went missing as children. Her 2 older sisters are quite successful and no longer live at home, but then one day her eldest sister, Grey, goes missing again. I loved the characters in this book, especially the side characters. I thought they were amazing and so unique. They definitely stand out as being their own new characters. I mean, a lot of characters can definitely feel like just they all blend into one at times, especially when it comes to like side characters. You tend to forget how individual some of them are, but these are super memorable. I can definitely like picture in my head still what I thought they looked like when I was reading it. This took some interesting turns. This was really good, but at the same time it had that sort of feel, you know, like if you walked into a dark room, like a dark old-fashioned room, and it had dead flowers everywhere. Like that's kind of like the feeling it gave me, which was fantastic for an October read. Next I read The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab, which again I have given to Rebecca for her to read. And The Near Witch is the debut novel of V.E. Schwab, who is a well-known, well-loved author, and I rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I was really trying not to compare this novel to the rest of her works because this was a debut novel and it was republished on the back of the success of her other works. I really liked the plot, but I just felt like this book could have been a lot shorter. It was around 300 pages and not a lot happened, and a lot of it was very repetitive. It was the main character getting up and going to someone else's house, then going back to their house, then getting up and going back to someone's house, and then going back, and then it just, I don't know, it just felt really repetitive, and a lot of scenes could be taken out to make it more of a novella. After I'd read 2 really small books and seen what these had achieved in such a short space, reading something much longer, I just felt like it wasn't a good use of time. Had I read it before these, I don't think I would have had that issue, but because I had read them and I was comparing it to something, I was making the comparisons about the pace was going and how such little happened in such a long time. Especially because this book attempts to be another young adult mystery horror. In this book, the main character lives in a town which has the legend about the near witch, who is a witch that would steal children, and that has become a legend. It happened about 70-80 years ago, but now children are starting to go missing again, and a stranger has appeared in the town, and she's seen the stranger, and the rest of the town thinks that the stranger is linked to the children's disappearance, but she has more of an open mind, and she starts suspecting that it might have something to do with the near witch. I would recommend this book for fans of V.E. Schwab, just if you want to read more of her works, but I wouldn't necessarily read this just for like general entertainment. But I did like it, and I thought it was well written for a debut novel, and I do commend V.E. Schwab for her ability to write such a great debut novel. My next book, my second to last book, was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. I have already spoke about this in my previous vlog, so if I am repeating myself for you, I'm very sorry. This is the second book in the From Blood and Ash series, and this was another 3-star read. I rated the first one 3 stars as well, but really enjoyed the last 30%, so I wanted to see what book 2 was about. Because if book 2 had been in the same vein of 30% of the last 30% of the first book, this would have been a 5-star read, but unfortunately it wasn't. This book fell somewhere in between the problems that I had with the first 70% of the first book and the last 30%, in the fact that the plot doesn't really advance in this book a lot, to be honest. These books are intended to be character driven, and that is okay. And I think they're so popular because a lot of people do like character driven books, but I just need more action, I need more plot. Like in the first half of this book, it all pretty much takes place within the same place, and it's just conversation after conversation after conversation. And I've had some chats with other people that like books, and for them they absolutely love it because they love the way the characters develop. And honestly, I really like the characters in this book too. I love how sarcastic and witty, I love the banter between the characters. I just wish there was that tiny little bit more movement in the plot, because this is over 600 pages. 600 pages, that is a lot of time I've spent reading this book to just be reading conversation. Give me more, give me more. Even if that is more smut, just give me more. So yeah, another 3-star read, but I do want to read book 3. I do recommend these for anyone who loves character driven books with a lot of dialogue. I would maybe hold some reservations if you are someone that likes to read more about world building and lots of different characters and plot advancement, action. I don't know. I enjoyed it. It was good. 3 stars is not a bad rating for me. Just wanted more, and I felt like something was going to appear in this book that didn't appear in this book. If you've read it, you probably know what I mean. It didn't happen. I'm hoping that it happens in the 3rd book. Also, I think my biggest problem with this book is that I'm over 1,000 pages into the series and I still don't understand the creatures or who people are. Like, I thought I knew like they are vampires and they're sort of like a werewolf, and now I'm just confused with how all of that links together. I'm probably just dumb, but I don't understand the creatures. To me, I was just like in my head pretend it's Twilight and then it makes sense. I don't know who's who or what's what or how who becomes what or how that and that work. I don't know how that creature is made from that one or what that one is special for. I don't know why she's significant, and I feel dumb. I knew I was forgetting a book. I was sat here like, I'm sure I said I was going to talk about 9 and there's only going to be 8 because I have one more in my hand. But it is the 2nd book I got off the publisher this month, and that is Under the Whispering Door. I did have a physical copy of this, but again, I've passed it on to Rebecca, as if she doesn't already have enough books. She's just casually calling you out on my channel there, Rebecca. Under the Whispering Door, I gave 4 stars. This is an adult novel where a man who is a horrid man, like, he is just the worst. He passes away and he ends up in this limbo state, and he hasn't passed on yet, and he goes through this character development where he becomes a nice, likeable man, and we also see some other characters making a similar journey as well, It touches on grief, mental health, death, and how we as humans perceive death and life beyond, and what our life means, and the passage of time. I thought it was a great read. I wouldn't choose to read it again, like as a reread, but I took a lot away from it, and there was a lot of times where I sat there and it was like, yeah, this actually makes me think twice about how I live right now in this moment, and how I perceive death, and how I grieve. So yeah, I think it was quite an important book. 9 minutes left on my SD card, so I'm going to wrap this up. The last book that I read this month is another book of my beautiful friend Lily, and that is Wranglestone. This one was the birthday gift, and I really enjoyed this book. This is a young adult novel. I believe this is going to be a series. It definitely feels like open-ended for more books. And this is a young adult zombie apocalypse novel, which I would never have got from the front, but actually you can see there's like zombies on it. There's like boys in the lake, and then there's like zombies here. I was actually really excited when I first started reading this. I read 3 chapters and I was like, wow, this book has hit the ground running. I did end up rating this 4 stars in the end, because I felt like the second half of this book didn't live up to the first half. But what a premise, honestly amazing. So Wranglestone is set in a post-apocalyptic America in like a national park, and the zombie apocalypse maybe broke out about 15 to 16 years prior to the setting of this book. The main character lives on a little island in the middle of a Great Lake, and there's lots of little islands on it, and what these islands do is it keeps them safe from the zombies, which sort of like live on the mainland and can't swim or can't get a canoe across the river. But it's coming up to the winter, and in the winter this lake freezes, and that allows them to cross and opens them up to danger. There's also the danger of bears. And when I sat and like contemplated what this book meant, I was like, wow, what an amazing premise. That's so unique. This book also does have a male romance, which I did not expect, but I thought was great. But I thought it was a great addition to this type of book. And although the romance is important to the plot, I felt like the underlying dealing with a zombie apocalypse in that type of situation was really good. There was also another mystery type plot where something was clearly like not right with this community that was going on, and I felt like the resolve of that was a bit anticlimactic, which was why I rated this down. Like the book sort of started going down a different path than what I was really hoping for. I also felt like I wasn't as connected to the characters as what I really wanted to be, but I highly recommend this book for anyone that is a fan of young adult, zombie apocalypse, anyone that loves gay romance. If there was a book 2, I would absolutely read it. Beautiful cover. Like if I wrote a book, whoever done this cover, I would want to do my cover art. Not that I will ever write a book, because where do you find the time? It says on the back that this book has been shortlisted for numerous awards, and I completely see why. This is really good. I have seen this a few times, buy one get one half price in Waterstones. So if you're in the UK and you can see it on that deal, pick it up because it's so worth it. So that is it for my October wrap up. I'm sorry that I don't have the mental capacity to actually talk about books in a more coherent way. I read books as a hobby, I don't read them to review, and sometimes putting my thoughts about books and my enjoyment about books into words is quite difficult, especially because when I'm reading them I'm thinking purely about my enjoyment perspective. It can be written so poorly, but as long as I'm taking some enjoyment out of it, like that's all that matters to me. Some reviewers see levels and depth to book that I just totally don't pick up on at all. But yeah, they're my recommendations if you are a reader that's looking for some enjoyment. I will be doing my November TBR in a couple of days, and I hope to see you on that video as well. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.